My name is Elena, I'm 34, and this is about the night my entire world collapsed during what was supposed to be our dream anniversary trip to Italy. We were at this beautiful hillside restaurant in Cinque Terre, celebrating 5 years of marriage. The view was breathtaking, candles flickered on white tablecloths, and I felt so grateful for Marcus and our life together. I excused myself to the restroom, taking a moment to fix my hair and smile at my reflection in the mirror. My cheeks were flushed from the wine, my eyes bright with happiness. I was thinking about how lucky I was, how perfect this moment felt. When I returned to our table, it was empty. Not just Marcus's seat, all 4 seats where he and his friends had been sitting. The white tablecloths still held the impressions of their plates, wine glasses abandoned mid-sip. I stood there confused, looking around the restaurant like maybe they'd moved to a different table as some kind of surprise. "Your husband and his party left about 10 minutes ago," the waiter said in broken English, avoiding my eyes. "They paid the bill and left." The words hit me like cold water. I stood there in my red dress clutching my purse, as other diners turned to stare. My phone showed no messages, no missed calls, just silence. I tried calling Marcus, straight to voicemail. His friends' numbers, the same mechanical response, over and over. The restaurant manager approached with pity in his eyes, speaking rapidly in Italian to the waiter. Their hushed conversation felt like needles under my skin. "Signora," he said gently. "They took the rental car. They said you had other arrangements." I felt my legs give out slightly. The elegant woman at the next table whispered something to her husband, and they both looked at me with that terrible mixture of sympathy and curiosity that makes humiliation burn twice as hot. I could feel every eye in the restaurant on me. This woman in red standing alone at an empty table. If you've ever felt completely abandoned by someone you trusted with your life, hit that like button, because what happened next changed everything, and I need you to hear this story to the end. Trust me, you won't see the ending coming. The next 6 hours were a blur of panic and disbelief. I walked through the narrow streets of this postcard-perfect town, my heels clicking on ancient stones, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Every hotel I approached had the same answer: no availability. It was peak season, they explained apologetically. My credit cards were declining because Marcus had frozen our joint accounts. The automated voice kept saying call your bank in that maddeningly cheerful tone. I spoke no Italian beyond grazie and prego. Every conversation became a frustrating pantomime of gestures and Google Translate. The townspeople were kind but couldn't understand why an American woman was wandering their streets alone at midnight, clearly lost and increasingly desperate. I found myself sitting on a bench at the tiny train station at 2 a.m., designer heels in my hand, my feet bleeding from walking on cobblestones never meant for stilettos. The payphone took me 20 minutes to figure out, and another 10 to successfully place a collect call to my sister Sarah in Boston. When she finally answered, her voice was thick with sleep and confusion. "Elena, where are you calling from? It's the middle of the night here." "Marcus left me," I whispered, and saying it out loud made it real in a way that made my chest tight. "He literally abandoned me in Italy." The silence stretched too long, filled with static, and the sound of Sarah fully waking up. "Elena, there's something I need to tell you. Mom saw Marcus at the airport yesterday. He was with Jessica and the guys, but they were all laughing about something. She said it looked like they were planning some kind of joke." Jessica, Marcus's ex-girlfriend who somehow remained part of his friend group. The same Jessica who always made subtle comments about my weight, my job, my luck in catching Marcus. She had this way of smiling when she said cruel things like it was all just friendly teasing. A local police officer approached, speaking gentle Italian. An elderly woman who'd been watching from a nearby cafe came over to translate. He was asking if I needed help, if someone had hurt me. The kindness of strangers while my own husband treated me like garbage, it broke something inside me that I didn't know could break. That night, sleeping on a cot in the police station's waiting area, wrapped in a scratchy blanket that smelled like disinfectant, I made a decision that would change everything. The humiliation was still fresh, still burning in my chest like acid, but underneath it, something colder was growing. Something that would serve me much better than tears. Maria Rossini found me the next morning. She was 67, owned a small bed and breakfast tucked into the hillside, and spoke enough English to understand my situation. Her weathered hands were gentle when she helped me up from that uncomfortable cot, and her eyes held no judgment, only recognition. When I tried to explain that I couldn't pay her, she waved her hand dismissively. You stay. You work a little. You heal a lot. Men like this, she spat on the ground, a gesture so fierce it startled me. They think women are toys to throw away, but we show them, no. Her bed and breakfast was like something from a fairy tale. Stone walls covered in climbing roses, tiny balconies overlooking the sea, rooms that smelled like lavender and old wood. For 3 days I helped Maria with cleaning, serving breakfast to guests, and slowly piecing my life back together. My hands stayed busy while my mind worked. She let me use her computer to check my emails, and what I found made my blood run cold. Marcus had been planning this for weeks. He'd forwarded me a single email, a travel itinerary showing his return flight with his friends, but no ticket for me. At the bottom, one line that I read over and over until it was burned into my memory. Figure it out, Elena. Maybe this will teach you to be less clingy. But there was more. Hidden in my spam folder were bank statements I'd never seen before. Marcus had been moving money from our joint savings into a personal account for months. Our emergency fund, the one I'd built from my grandmother's inheritance, was completely drained. $23,000, gone. Maria found me crying over the computer screen, my shoulders shaking with rage and heartbreak. She sat beside me, her weathered hands covering mine. Cara mia, anger is good, but revenge must be smart, like a fox, not wild, like a wolf. She was right. I needed to think, to plan, and I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with when I got home. The crying could come later. Right now I needed to become someone Marcus had never met before. With Maria's help, I extended my stay by a week. I told everyone back home that I was having such a wonderful time. I decided to explore more of Italy solo. The lies came easily now. Marcus's response to my cheerful text was cold. Whatever. Don't expect me to pick you up from the airport. But I wasn't just playing tourist. I was digging. I called our bank, pretending to be confused about some charges on our account. The representative was sympathetic and helpful. Too helpful. She revealed that Marcus had applied for a home equity line of credit using forged versions of my signature. He'd borrowed against the house my grandmother had left me, the house that was supposed to be solely in my name. My hands were shaking when I hung up the phone. Maria brought me espresso and sat quietly while I processed what I'd just learned. Marcus wasn't just abandoning me, he was stealing from me, systematically, carefully, like he'd been planning this for months. I called my grandmother's lawyer, Mr. Peterson. His voice was warm and familiar, and what he told me made my hands shake even more. Elena, your husband contacted me 6 months ago, asking about the deed to your property. I told him he had no legal claim to it, but, well, he seemed very interested in the specific language of your grandmother's will. The will. I'd never read it carefully, trusting Marcus when he said it was just legal nonsense. It stated that the house would remain mine as long as I was independently residing there as my primary residence. Marcus had been researching loopholes, looking for ways to claim what wasn't his. But he'd made one crucial mistake. All his scheming had left a paper trail, and I was about to become very familiar with every single document. That night I sat on Maria's terrace overlooking the Mediterranean making a list. Not of everything Marcus had done to me, that would take too long. A list of everything I was going to do to him. The sea breeze carried the scent of jasmine and salt, and for the first time in days I felt calm, focused, ready. I flew back to Boston on a Thursday afternoon, calm and collected in a way that surprised me. The old Elena would have been crying, anxious, preparing apologies for an abandonment that wasn't her fault. This Elena wore sunglasses and carried herself like someone who had nothing to be ashamed of. Marcus wasn't at the airport. I hadn't expected him to be. Instead, I took a taxi to my sister Sarah's house, where I'd shipped all the documents I'd gathered during my extended vacation. The driver tried to make small talk, but I was lost in thought, watching familiar neighborhoods pass by like scenes from someone else's life. Sarah's face when she opened the door told me everything. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usual perfect makeup absent. She'd been crying. Elena, thank God you're back. There's so much I need to tell you. Over coffee in her pristine kitchen, she laid out everything the family had discovered while I was gone. Marcus had been telling people I'd had a breakdown in Italy, that I'd run off with some local man, that he was giving me space to figure myself out. He'd been playing the abandoned husband, garnering sympathy from our friends and family. He actually had people feeling sorry for him, Sarah said, her voice tight with anger, said you'd been acting erratic for months, that the trip was supposed to help you. But Jessica had made a mistake at my cousin's birthday party the weekend before. She'd gotten drunk and bragged about the prank they'd pulled in Italy, how they'd planned it for weeks, how they'd laughed imagining me stranded and helpless. She actually said, Sarah's voice cracked, that it was about time someone taught you that you weren't as special as you thought you were. Several family members had heard this. My cousin Kelly had been recording videos for social media and accidentally caught part of Jessica's drunken confession. Word was spreading. Marcus's story wasn't holding up, and people were starting to ask questions. But I wasn't ready to see anyone yet. I had work to do first. I drove to the house, my house, and found Marcus's car in the driveway. The lights were on, and through the living room window, I could see him on the couch, watching TV like nothing had happened. He had a beer in his hand and his feet up on the coffee table I'd inherited from my grandmother. I sat in my rental car for 10 minutes, just watching him. He looked so comfortable, so secure in his little world where actions didn't have consequences. He scratched his stomach, changed the channel, completely at peace with himself. He had no idea what was coming. I didn't go inside that night. Instead, I drove to a hotel and began making phone calls. The first was to Mr. Peterson, my grandmother's lawyer. His voice was grave when I explained what I'd discovered about the forged signatures. The second call was to a private investigator named Caroline Webb, who specialized in marital fraud cases. Her reputation was spotless, her rates astronomical, and her success record perfect. What you're describing, Caroline said, after I'd laid out everything, constitutes several crimes. Identity theft, forgery, fraud. But more importantly for your divorce case, it's grounds for fault-based dissolution with potential criminal charges. She was expensive, but I had money. Marcus didn't know about a small inheritance from my grandfather that had gone into an account I'd opened before we were married. Money I'd been saving for our future children's college funds. The irony wasn't lost on me. Now it was going toward destroying their father. Caroline's investigation moved quickly. Within 48 hours she'd uncovered a pattern of financial deception going back 2 years. Marcus had been skimming money from our accounts, making unauthorized charges, and even taking cash advances on credit cards in my name. The total was staggering. But the real bombshell came on day 3. Elena. Caroline's voice was carefully neutral over the phone. I need you to sit down for this. Marcus has been having an affair with Jessica for over a year. I have photographs, hotel receipts, credit card statements, but that's not the worst part. My blood turned to ice. I was sitting in my hotel room looking out at the city lights, and suddenly everything felt very still. What's the worst part? They've been planning to get you out of the house so they can claim it's been abandoned. In Massachusetts, if a spouse abandons the marital home for an extended period, the other spouse can petition for sole occupancy. They were going to use your breakdown in Italy as evidence that you'd abandoned the marriage. The room spun slightly. They hadn't just humiliated me for fun, they'd been trying to steal my inheritance, my home, my entire life. The cruelty was so calculated, so thorough, that for a moment I couldn't breathe. But they'd miscalculated. I hadn't abandoned anything. I was coming to reclaim it all. I chose the setting carefully, our annual family barbecue at my parents' house. It was a tradition Marcus loved because he got to play the charming son-in-law, telling stories and making everyone laugh. Jessica always somehow ended up invited as part of the friend group, and she'd spend the day making subtle digs at me while everyone else thought she was just being friendly. I arrived early and pulled my father aside. Dad had never been Marcus's biggest fan. Something about him had always rubbed Dad wrong, though he'd kept his opinions to himself for my sake. When I showed him the financial documents Caroline had compiled, his face went through several shades of red. That son of a bitch, he muttered, studying the forged signatures. Elena, honey, what do you need me to do? Just follow my lead, Dad. And maybe have Uncle Jim handy. Uncle Jim was a retired police detective who still had connections downtown. He'd always been the family member you called when something needed to be handled quietly and efficiently. When Marcus arrived with his friends including Jessica, he seemed genuinely surprised to see me. He'd clearly expected me to stay away, maybe send some tearful text about how I wasn't ready to face everyone yet. Instead, I was manning the grill, wearing a sundress that looked expensive because I'd bought it in Italy with money from my secret account. I was laughing with my cousins like I didn't have a care in the world. Elena, Marcus approached cautiously, his voice carrying that fake concern he'd perfected over the years. You look good. How was the rest of your trip? Educational, I said, not looking up from the burgers. I learned so much about myself, about what I'm capable of. Jessica lingered nearby, clearly eavesdropping. She looked nervous, which was unusual for her. She was usually the picture of confidence when it came to undermining me, but something in my tone seemed to unsettle her. That's great, honey. Marcus's voice carried that condescending tone I'd learned to hate. We were all worried about you after your episode. The conversations around us gradually quieted. Family members were starting to sense tension in the air, the way animals sense storms coming. I set down my spatula and looked directly at him for the first time in weeks. My episode? I asked, clearly loudly enough for everyone to hear. Is that what you're calling it? You mean the episode where you and your friends abandoned me in a foreign country with no money, no transportation, and no way to get home? My voice was calm, conversational, but it carried across the entire backyard like I was giving a speech. The silence was immediate and complete. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Someone turned off the music. Marcus's face went white. Elena, that's not, you're misremembering. Am I? I pulled out my phone and began reading. Here's the text Jessica sent to my cousin Kelly 3 days after you left me stranded. You should have seen Elena's face when she realized we'd left her. Marcus said it was like watching a lost puppy trying to figure out where its owner went. Jessica made a small strangled sound. Kelly was standing near the back porch, her face confirming every word. Kelly forwarded that to me, by the way. I continued, my voice never wavering, along with about 6 other messages where you all discussed your little prank. Uncle Jim stepped forward from where he'd been listening by the porch. His police training never left him. He had a way of commanding attention just by moving. Elena also asked me to run some financial checks as a favor. Marcus, did you know that forging someone's signature on loan documents is a felony in Massachusetts? The color drained from Marcus's face completely. Around us, my family members were starting to understand the scope of what had happened. My mother had her hand over her mouth. My father looked like he wanted to commit violence. You tried to steal my house, I said, my voice still unnaturally calm. You drained our accounts. You forged legal documents, and you did it all while planning to humiliate me so badly that I'd be too broken to fight back. I stepped closer to him, close enough that only he could hear my next words. But here's the thing, Marcus. I'm not broken. I'm not humiliated. I'm free. I pulled an envelope from my purse and handed it to him. Those are divorce papers. You're also being served with a restraining order, and the district attorney will be filing fraud charges Monday morning. I suggest you use the weekend to find a good lawyer. Marcus stood there holding the papers, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. Jessica tried to slip away, but my cousin David blocked her path. Where you going, Jess? Elena's got some papers for you too. The next 6 months were a blur of legal proceedings, but every single day felt like Christmas morning. Caroline's investigation had uncovered even more than we'd initially found. Marcus had been systematically stealing from me for 3 years, not 2. The total amount with interest and penalties was close to $200,000. The criminal case moved faster than the divorce. Marcus pled guilty to forgery and financial fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence, 2 years probation, full restitution, and a permanent record that would follow him for the rest of his life. His lawyer tried to argue that it was a marital dispute, but the evidence was too overwhelming. Jessica was charged as an accessory after investigators discovered she'd helped him research the legal loopholes he'd tried to exploit. She lost her job at the marketing firm when her criminal record became public. Turns out, companies don't like employing people who help steal from their clients. But the real justice came in smaller, more personal ways. The story of what they'd done spread through our social circle like wildfire. Marcus went from being seen as the charming husband of a difficult wife to being known as the man who abandoned his wife in a foreign country as part of an elaborate theft scheme. Jessica, who'd built her entire identity around being the beautiful, successful woman who could have had any man, became known as the mistress who helped her boyfriend try to steal his wife's inheritance. They deserved each other, and everyone could see it now. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning in October. I walked out of the courthouse into crisp autumn air feeling lighter than I had in years. The leaves were turning, the sky was that perfect clear blue that only comes in fall, and I felt like I was seeing the world clearly for the first time. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria in Italy. "Cara, how did it go?" I sent her a photo of my signed divorce decree with the caption, "Justice is served. Thank you for teaching me to be a fox, not a wolf." Her response came immediately. "Now you live, Elena. Now you really live." She was right. I was finally ready to live. A year later, I'm writing this from my grandmother's house. My house, which is now mortgage-free thanks to the restitution settlement. The rooms that once felt tainted by Marcus's presence now feel like mine again. I've redecorated slowly, deliberately, choosing every piece because I love it, not because it matches someone else's vision of what our life should look like. I never remarried. I didn't need to. I discovered that I actually liked my own company, liked making decisions without having to consider someone else's ulterior motives, liked knowing that everything in my life was there because I chose it. Maria visits every few months. She's become like a second mother to me, and she loves telling the story of how she found a broken American woman and helped her find her strength. "You were never weak," she tells me over espresso in my kitchen. "You just forgot how strong you were." I still get updates about Marcus and Jessica through mutual friends who can't resist sharing gossip. Their relationship imploded within 6 months of my divorce being finalized. Apparently, stolen love doesn't feel as exciting when it's no longer stolen. Marcus works at a car dealership now, his professional reputation destroyed by the criminal conviction. Jessica moved back in with her parents at 35, a fact that gives me more satisfaction than it probably should. Sometimes I wonder if they ever think about that night in Italy, if they ever realize that their moment of cruel triumph was actually the moment they lost everything. But mostly, I don't think about them at all. Last month, I received an unexpected email from the restaurant in Cinque Terre, the same restaurant where Marcus abandoned me. The manager, who remembered my story, was writing to tell me that they'd banned Marcus and his friends from ever returning after other diners complained about their behavior that night. "We do not serve people who abandon their families," he wrote in careful English. "You are always welcome here, Signora. You showed grace in a graceless situation." I'm planning to take him up on that offer next spring. This time I'm traveling alone by choice, not by abandonment. I'm going to sit at that same table, order something delicious, and toast to the woman I became the night my husband left me behind. If this story taught you anything about finding strength in your darkest moments, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing, it just takes time to see it clearly. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. Your support means everything.